What's up, everybody? Man, Eric Wilson, Sports Arena, and alongside three of the greats I brought with me here today to discuss recapping The Last Dance. So, of course, ladies first, Sports Talk Florida, Ruth the Truth, alongside my man, Jake Rongholt, Turning Point Podcast, and also Turning Point, both sides of the story.
Yes, both sides.
I know I probably messed that up. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I'll have both sides of The Last Dance coming up tomorrow morning. So.
There you go. And as always, and as he said before we started this thing, it's like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. Michael Carotenuto, NBC Sports Radio, 1060 The Sports Hangover out there in Arizona. So thank you all for joining me. And let's jump right into The Last Dance. I mean, because I have to say I kind of shedded a tear when the final credits rolled, because now I have to ask myself the question, what the hell am I going to watch on Sunday nights at 9 o'clock? You know what I mean?
I might binge watch it and watch it just all through again.
I agree on that.
Yeah.
You know, those bathroom breaks, you might have lost a lot of information, you know? So yeah,
I held it for 2 hours. I'm sorry. Hey, it's like a movie. I had to stay because I didn't want to miss anything.
Right.
Jake, give me your impression of The Last Dance, man.
Who's going? Can I go first?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. Well, coming from a young individual that was born in the early 90s, I was born in 93 when all this chaos seemed to have just been sparking off or re-sparking. And The Last Dance really gave me an opportunity. I think ESPN and all the producers of this documentary that really opened my eye to the dynasty of the Chicago Bulls, and all the respect that they have earned is well deserved, and they put that on a display, and I was really happy to be able to see that, especially when they were talking about Space Jam. I believe it was episode 8 when they were discussing Space Jam. That brought so much back to my childhood because I was absolutely obsessed with Space Jam as a young kid. I probably have seen that movie, I'm not even lying, like 200 times. And Michael Jordan was a big inspiration in me playing basketball. So once again, thank you ESPN for giving me a chance to relive it. And actually, it felt like I was living it for the first time since I was only like 2 years old when all of this was going on. And my memory at 2 years old was not very good. So yes, it was great.
The biggest thanks got to go to Jason Hare, though. Jason Hare and his crew did an incredible job. I mean, we're talking about a guy who did the 85 Bears documentary, had Vince Vaughn do the narration and everything. This was this big project. He took 4 years to get this thing off the ground, and then all these interviews and these inside stories. I mean, who else drew a tear in episode 9 when we found out the true story of Steve Kerr? Because Absolutely. I was flat out blown away by everything that this guy was going through at the age of 18 when he lost his father in Beirut, who was the president of the American University in Lebanon, and he was unfortunately gunned down by two people that were disguised as students. And just taking that and bringing that to the basketball court, I mean, this is a guy who would only average 6 points career, 6 points. That's incredible to me. And he was still able to have his moment. That was the best thing about The Last Dance, is that every single player that was interviewed, Kukoc, Pippen, Dennis Rodman, B.J. Armstrong, they all had their moment. They all had their Last Dance moment. And that was one thing that really impressed me. I also liked how in episode 10, how we got that little apology letter from Scottie Pippen, because at that point, we saw that, he quit in that game against the New York Knicks. That really hurt them, and that took them out of the playoffs in 1994. But then you look at what he did on that court with Michael Jordan in that final year when he had a bad back, comes out from halftime and comes out and plays his tail off. He's still able to get a couple of big shots and keep the Bulls within this. I mean, that is incredible. I mean, that's what makes great sports documentaries. And I would not be a bit surprised if you see this nominated for an Oscar for Best Documentary, because this was 100% one of the greatest sports documentaries I've ever watched.
And unpickable timing for it to be coming out during the quarantine when we're suffering for no sports. I felt like the games that were going on during this documentary, it felt like it was going on live. Like I was getting excited. I'm on the edge of my couch. I'm like, wait, this happened 20 years ago. What am I doing? So it was great. I loved it. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, it was supposed to come in June anyway after the finals.
Okay.
And I know that. And Jason Erdla on SportsCenter talked about how, and Jake, you had mentioned when we talked in the beginning about how it wasn't finished editing, but they had all the interviews were done. Everything was done. The storyboard was done, but he had to take a picture. He showed, there was a picture that he showed at SportsCenter, and he had all the freaking Post-its up. It was unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, I was like barely a few years older than Ruthie when Space Jam came out, so I probably saw it like 500 times. But that being said,
501 right here.
okay,
Represent.
Okay, I owned the
VHS.
VHS, ladies and gentlemen.
And so did I.
Let's just call it what it is.
It's at my mom's house, but I have
buddy.
it.
Right. Everybody.
Who has the coin? Who still has the Space Jam coin
I
that
lost
came
mine
with
a
the
long time
VHS?
ago.
I do.
I had the coin. I had the coin as well. Keep trying, bud. You're doing great
Look,
here.
I'm glad you guys all had your coins. Great. Go play Space Jam, the video game. But no, but Steve Kerr.
Go
Steve
see
Kerr.
your legacy.
Steve Kerr, unfortunately, he went to U of A, and we all know my disdain for U of A.
Yes.
But I knew that story from the time I was, probably 9 or 10 years old, 8 or whatever it was, because it's the only time, and Eric knows this, I told him this before, I was absolutely disgusted and vomiting being a Sun Devil fan because they were beating them, of course, because Lute Olson always beat the Sun Devils, and U of A did, but after Lute Olson got there. But the student section, he's at the free throw line, and I'm so glad, in a way, I'm glad they didn't put it in, not to make like that student section look better, but the ASU student section, when he was at the free throw line, started chanting, "Where's your father?" And like anybody that's a Sun Devil fan was like, I mean, it wasn't like the crowd, it was the student section. And again, you could hear it. And I remember we were watching the game, and I'm like, I didn't get what they were saying. But then like a few years later, as I got older, I knew, and like Lute Olson, he hit both free throws though in the midst of it, and he subbed him out. Lute Olson walked him down to the end of the bench and was just hugging him. But yeah, Steve Kerr's story I knew. But yeah, like you said, Jason Air, everything they did. I mean, the fact that, and I still can't stand Karl Malone till this day anyway, but the fact that he was too much of a crybaby to be in it. Byron Russell too. I mean, John Stockton, allegedly I was listening to Stephen A. and them saying like he, be willingly did it. But I mean, the fact like my favorite parts were because I literally did think in 98, as much as I like loved that, like watching the Bulls and what they did. And I mean, just what Jordan could do on the court, but again, just what his teammates did and like the evolution of Kukoc. I thought Indiana was the better team and was going to beat him because here's the thing, like, and Eric knows this too, because Reggie Miller, to me, like when people talk about last shots and when people say they're, LeBron fans or whatever, I'm like, I can name like 50 people, but I want to take a last shot. But like being young and growing up, and yeah, him playing obviously in the Pac-10 at the time out on the West Coast, dude, I saw Reggie Miller play in college, and I'll tell you what, right now, NBA-wise, you have anybody in front of you, like I'll take Reggie Miller. I understand if people take Ray Allen or Larry Bird. I get that. But like, and again, Jordan wasn't even that great of a shooter when he came in the league. I mean, he developed it, but the relationship with Reggie Miller, and again, I always loved that, watching the Pacers play. And when they showed the fight, I was just like, God, I remember watching that game.
93.
I was like, and I know Eric's not wasn't a Jordan fan, but I was like, give it to him, Reggie. Like, I wanted Jordan to whoop him, but I'm like, yeah.
Here's my thing, Mike. When it came to that, I was never, and still to this day, I am not a Reggie Miller fan. So that was the one time. Oh, I'm not. I'm not.
You weren't a Jordan fan.
Man.
You weren't a Reggie Miller fan.
Nope.
No Jordan. No Reggie Miller.
Nope.
Okay, is it on court or off the court that you have an issue with Reggie Miller?
Oh, I don't like Reggie Miller, period. And here's my reason why. I'll sum it up to you in 3 simple words. New York Knicks. That was my team. The Knicks of the 90s, Mike, you can laugh all you want. But the Knicks, the Knicks of the 90s was my team. When you had John Starks, Charles Oakley, rest in peace to Anthony Mason, by far my favorite player of all time in Patrick Ewing. It didn't matter who the 5th player was. That was my squad. I rode with them I rode with Ewing since Georgetown, playing on the East Coast and following him. under John Thompson. I followed that whole transition.
Right.
So when he went to the Knicks, I was like, okay, I'm a Knicks fan.
When the envelope was frozen? When the envelope was frozen just
Whatever.
so he could go to New York?
Whatever.
No, dude.
All I know.
I understand you don't like Reggie Miller for that, but, dude, it's like not being a Miller fan or Jordan fan, but you got to respect his talent. You would have taken Reggie Miller on the Knicks in a
You're
heartbeat.
absolutely right. I take nothing away from what they did on the court, and I respected what they did for the game of basketball.
Right.
But personally, oh no. I was watching. I wanted Jordan to hit him. That was the one time I was like, knock him out, please.
Well, and he said, Jake, on your boys show, on Dan Patrick's show, he's like, this is how much control, like how big he was. Like he came at me, he swung at me, and in my home arena, I got thrown out. Reggie Miller got bounced. But my favorite part, I mean, it's tough to pick a favorite, but I mean, Jordan talking about, just seeing like what the dream team was, because we actually, my older sister put in for it, but we had an exchange student from Spain before, like he went back, but he was from Barcelona, and he brought us like, Barcelona Olympic shirts and stuff like that. But I mean, he was so stoked because we had him, it was like for June and July, and he went back before the Summer Olympics. That's how the program. But I mean, just seeing all the posters I had up of Jordan. I mean, I had Jordan everywhere. And he's like, oh, we can't wait. I mean, I'm like, I do not know how the dream team is how the buses are going to move anywhere. Yes, they have developed roads, but like people are going to be lining the buses from the hotel to any of the arenas and the Olympic port and stuff like that. But the 92 games, to bring that back, I mean, just to see what it meant, because again, I knew a lot of people were against using, pro athletes, but these European players, and I mean, you guys all know this, but I mean, yeah, they were deemed quote unquote amateurs, but they were freaking playing pro ball since they were like 14 or 15. I'm not saying they were great, but they developed a little bit quicker because you're playing against guys that are throwing you around.
Luka Doncic.
You learn to play the game. And it's like, it's one of those things. So the 92 Olympic, the whole thing with Isaiah, I think, the reason, and like to me, Isaiah's performance against the Lakers, that game where he put 20 points up in the fourth quarter, to me that's probably the single greatest quarter, from a guard that's on 1 foot, but the single greatest quarter in the finals, probably in the 90s, late 80s, probably in the 80s.
Mike, no, you can't say that. Mike, in the entire 90s, you're deeming
in the 80s, because that was the 80s. That's why I rewound.
Okay.
In the 80s,
all right.
It was the single greatest quarter in the 80s. But Isaiah was a freak. But the thing that drove me nuts, and I know it drove people that wanted to hate the bad boy Pistons. Personally, I liked them all except for Lambeer, because Eric, he's that stiff I'm talking about. Like, dude, all he did was foul. He did score some points, but he was in the middle. I'm not saying he wasn't athletic at 6'11". But it's like he was pretty much a stiff in a starting five with, like, awesome dudes. That being said, like Isaiah said, Lambeer said, we're not going to shake hands. I'm sorry, man. This team lost to you the last 3 years in the playoffs, in which, the Pistons won 2 titles?
Yeah.
So it was like –
back to back.
Like,
right.
Yeah, they lost to you, and he shook your hands. Like, if you're Isaiah and you don't want to shake anybody else's hand, fine. But you're going to listen to a teammate. What's Lambeer going to do? Like, not give you your food in the locker room if you shake hands? Like, that's what disgusts me. I mean, you saw what motivated Jordan in holding grudges and how he fired himself up and just went at dudes. But, yeah, the Pistons had no chance after that. Like, literally, you're going to walk off and, when you saw Jordan's reaction, he can say whatever he wants to say. I think it's ridiculous to still have this grudge, because Bob Costas said it on SportsCenter last night.
They're athletes. They're competitors.
Isaiah, yeah, but during that 97-98 season, when the NBA was on NBC, Bob Costas was like, I heard every phrase that man said. He never once took a side shot, an undershot at Jordan. Everything was and it wasn't over complimentary, but it was fact of the game. Isaiah never said anything bad about him. Again, I understand the not shaking of the hands, but dude, how old are you now? Like, now you're not even talking to Charles Barkley because he was critical of your your first hirings in Charlotte, like the yes
when
people
he
that are
was owner
around.
of the
So it's like,
Hornets.
again, I'm not saying Isaiah and the Pistons were right, but I'm not going to hold. I mean, at that point, like you won so much more. You're so decorated. Like, at this point, you're not competing against them. Like, again, I would want Isaiah to apologize.
Mike, I
first.
get it.
I'm not saying that.
Mike, I
But
get it. You
Isaiah
need to
needs
move on.
apologize first.
I'm not disagreeing with you. You need to move on from that, but you have to take everything in its context. And the context was at that moment when Michael had finally begun to ascend himself to going from Mike Jordan to Michael Jordan to MJ, you know, there was a certain level of respect that was he had earned that. It wasn't like that was his first year in the league and, oh, he got lucky.
I agree.
Mike did
Right.
what he had to do
Right.
to get
and they
to
beat
that
him
point.
Up. No, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm
And
just saying,
so-
like,
And so at this point, 30 years later, Mike even said it. He's like, listen, he can't say nothing to me about back
Exactly.
then,
right.
okay? For that moment, because
Oh, okay.
Michael, and the one thing I took from it was Michael always, MJ lived in the moment. He didn't
Right.
concern himself with what happened previously. If he did, he used it as fuel for the fire, and he
Right.
never concerned himself with tomorrow. When
what he
he
did with
was on
Byron
that
Russell.
court, it was about that game. And
Right.
so for me, when you take me back to a time in my life where I may have had a disagreement with somebody, or something may have transpired between me and another individual, I can move on from it, but I'm not going to forget about it. And how I feel about you
Right. I'm not
may
saying
still be the
forget,
same way that it was 30
Right.
years ago based on that moment.
Right. I'm not saying forget about it. I'm just saying, like, I just think that Isaiah, again, in broadcasting, he had a chance to take shots, and the Pistons beat him up, and I get that. But Isaiah's point, the one thing I will say objectively, when we watched it in that episode, and he said the one thing, and again, just because someone else didn't do it doesn't make it right. But the Celtics had walked off the court, and Kevin McHale shook Isaiah. They were kind of jawing, but Isaiah, it wasn't like a fight. And Kevin McHale, like, shook his hand, and that was it. But all those cats walked off the court. I didn't agree with that either. That's why, again, I know it's the last dance, but to bring it to hockey, you very rarely ever see at the end of a series, 5, 6, 7 games, they line up and they shake hands like men. And it's only happened like 2 or 3 times in my lifetime where teams didn't do it. So, again, I'm not saying that Jordan, that's why I said Isaiah had no chance. You don't have to, you fuel that, and the Pistons had no chance after that. I mean, obviously, Rodman left, Mahorn was gone, he went to Philly, stuff like that. But I just think, the grudges that Jordan held, and again, I'm glad he was like that, because the overlying thing about being mean, and I know we talked about this after episodes 1 and 2, even being on Good Morning America, dude, I'd play with that cat in a heartbeat. Like, I mean, and he literally, you could tell, genuinely felt bad about punching Steve Kerr. Like, yeah, I punched the smallest guy in the gym, but Kerr flat out punched him first. He's like, I didn't care. Like,
Yeah,
he went at it. I went back and punched him. So I would play with a dude like that in a heartbeat. Again, yes, sometimes it'd be tough, but you have to fire. You fire back, they'll respect you. You perform, they'll respect you. But he brought everybody up. But with the Isaiah, it's like you're better than it. It's like at that point, it's like it's 30 years. Like, you don't have to forget it, but you can be like adults. And I mean, I'm not saying if they're in the same room, Jordan's going to walk out. But, I mean, it's just
Ruthie, go ahead. Get in there.
Piggybacking off of what Mike was saying, one of the highlights of the documentary for me was when Jordan got actually choked up when he was discussing his relationship with some of his teammates and how he felt that maybe some of the teammates were taking his criticism maybe the wrong way and making it seem like he was more of a bully instead of being like a nice guy. Like when they asked, is Jordan a nice guy? They were like, he could have been a nice guy. Sure. But at the end of the day, you had to respect his answer when it came to wanting to push the individuals that were around him so they could get a championship, because he mentioned how Steve Kerr and some of the players that arrived in 95 and 96 were kind of piggybacking off of the high of their earlier championships that they had nothing to do with. And he made that a point that he had to hold everybody accountable so they could be on that championship level, so they could continue to be a championship team. And he actually got a little choked up because he asked for a break at that moment when he was discussing that, because, it didn't seem like he wanted to come off of being a bully. He just wanted to come off to being a champion elite person, and he wanted everyone to be on his level. And I can relate to that because being a captain of my basketball team junior and senior year, I felt like I was a little too nice and I could have pushed my players a little bit more, and that was my job as a leader. So I definitely feel Michael Jordan on that part of his documentary.
Well, but when he said too, like, but before that, you guys remember he said, like, if you don't want to put in and win with me, then why are you here? And he's like, yeah, I mean, he definitely thought certain things, but I mean, like the relationship with like Scott Burrell, he said, I kept trying like to fight me, like even in a good way, but he was just too nice. I mean, Burrell's a dude that had talent. I mean, if he's playing for most other teams, he's probably their one or two go-to guy back then, any other team maybe, and he's averaging, 18 to 20 points a night. I mean, there are nights he put in 20, 25 points, and you see that Bulls team, and I remember going back every day, like when people actually read the newspaper and like looking at box scores. There were two things in being young that I looked forward to is looking at Bo Jackson's stats every day of the year, whether it be football and baseball, and what the Bulls did. Like, literally, I was like, dang, but like a guy like Scott Burrell. But, I mean, you need somebody like that on a team, and I think that's why, like, when Bird, Magic, and Jordan, they sat down for ESPN and God, I have to look it up, but quite a few years back, either way. And Matt, they all pretty much said in unison, because I think it was after the Celtics had won, but then LeBron went to obviously Miami, and you see the look in Bird's face, like he's like, dude, I'd get on the court and whoop these guys right now. Like Bird was like that. Magic was like, if they would have got drafted or if it would have been a trade, but we never would have called each other up as much respect as we had. I mean, for him, we wanted to beat him. Like you were where you were. Not saying that there couldn't be free agency, but the drive that Jordan had, I mean, literally, it is out of this world. I mean, and
can I get a question to Jake?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jake, so I wanted to ask you, what is your interpretation of the relationship between Jerry Krause, and is he considered, the greatest GM of all time since, Phil Jackson came into that category as the greatest of all time, as well as the Chicago Bulls, the greatest team of all time? Do you respect Jerry Krause, and do you believe he deserves the title of being one of the greatest GMs of the NBA?
I believe after 1998, no, I don't have any respect for him because of the rebuild was just an absolute disaster. I mean, he brought in Tim Floyd. He planned the rebuild right from the beginning. I mean, that quote alone, when he said, I don't care if you go 82-0, you will not be the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. That's what he said to Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
I was shocked. When Jerry Krause died, a part of me died inside because I was a big Bulls fan. I knew what he did for this team. I know the talent that he brought in and everything like that. But the way that he was portrayed on The Last Dance really showed what this happened. It's a rampant ego that just built year after year as Michael Jordan came along. And, I mean, so it went from, Doug Collins, and then Phil Jackson comes in. If it wasn't for Phil Jackson, no, because Michael did like working for Doug. He loved playing for Phil. And he even said, if Phil Jackson is the coach of the Chicago Bulls, I will come back. If he is not, I am done. So it was all about Phil Jackson at that point. I really respect what Jerry Krause did throughout the 90s, but I don't respect what he did. That rebuild was a disaster. He brought in a horrible coach who won only 13 games in 1999. I know you lose Michael Jordan, you lose Scottie Pippen. I get that. But, man, going from championship to the basement like that, I was just in shock. And I remember because I sat through those god-awful Tim Floyd games after winning that 6th championship.
So you're saying you could have coached him better, Jake? You'd have been better than Tim Floyd?
Anybody could have coached
Listen,
better.
the four of us could have been on that coaching staff, and we could have made that work.
30 wins. Jeez, this was 13. I was blown away by this.
Do you think
to answer your question to Jake, though, Ruthie, to answer your question to Jake, Jerry Krause, again, a good GM, yes, but the all-time best personnel person in NBA history is Jerry West, hands down.
There you go.
Lakers,
the best.
Warriors, Clippers, Grizzlies. Like, the dude goes anywhere. The dude gets – I mean, you don't become the logo
people at a high level, I think that
What?
makes a huge
He was the
difference.
only reason that
What's that?
were able to
I
get
said he
rid of
could
Chris
see his
Paul.
players on eye level, so I think that makes a huge
Well,
difference.
right, no, but I'm just saying, like, he became the logo for a reason. I mean, as a player, like, and again, obviously I wasn't around, but like staying up late night back in the day, ESPN2, ESPN Classic, watching like Jerry West and those Laker teams play, I'm like, dude, that dude could have been a guard in any generation. Like, I'm not saying he would have scored the same, I'm not saying, but Jerry West is an example. Jerry Krause, again, Jason Ayers said, like, it's tough because obviously he was gone. And people felt like you're painting him as the villain. Yes, to agree with Jake, when you say he go 82-0, he's not going to be back. Here's my problem with general managers. And Eric, you and I actually talked about this when you called into my show one time. We were talking football and Jerry Jones. Here's the problem with general managers I have. Dude, if you hire me to be a GM, you didn't draft Jordan A. Okay, fine. You fell into Jordan. Cool. Anybody be happy with that. But you draft Pippen, you draft Grant, you trade for Cartwright, you trade Jordan's boy Oakley for Cartwright, right? Which again ended up being a better deal for them because again, you needed at the time you needed a 7-foot center. You needed a 7-foot center. I'm not saying Cartwright's better than Oakley, Eric. I'm not saying that. It worked out for what the Bulls needed. That being said, he was a good GM, but the problem I have, and Ruthie, you and I can talk about this on your show or on my show separately about football with Jerry Jones. Shut your mouth about Jimmy Johnson. Shut your mouth about Jimmy Johnson because you could have won 4 in a row. I'm not saying they wouldn't have lost to the Niners the next year and the Niners wouldn't have beat the Chargers, but Eric and I have talked about this before too. If they get past the Niners that year, they destroy the Chargers as well. They're the only team in the NFL history to this point then to win 4 in a row. But again, shut your mouth. If I'm a GM, guess what? If I keep doing my job, I'm going to get raises. Win all the championships you want, and I know
But it wasn't just
say,
that.
well, hold on, Jake,
You
Jake,
have
hold on.
to put a lot of blame, Mike. You have to put blame to the owner, Jerry Reinsdorf. He is the one that let Jerry Krause run this show. Even after Michael left, after Phil Jackson left, he let Jerry Krause continue to run this thing. Jerry Reinsdorf had
because he made hundreds of millions, Jake. He made hundreds of millions.
Happen, and he never did. I mean, I just
Right,
dealt
I
with
get
Bob
that, but
Boyd
we're
and
talking-
John Paxson for years because
we
of
get to
this. And now finally
Reinsdorf.
there's a rebuild that actually might make some sense because Jerry Reinsdorf was actually doing something. But the way that Michael Jordan is towards Jerry Reinsdorf is exactly the reason that Michael Jordan has not been back to Chicago since he retired.
Right.
I agree, but Jake, we're talking GMs. I get it. We can talk about Reinsdorf later. But as a GM, yes.
It's not just all
he
about
accept-
GMs, though. It's also about
he
ownership.
accept-
You
Okay,
can't
hold
hate on general
on.
managers.
Hold
General
on.
managers are the reason why teams are what they are.
Okay, Jake, a general manager never threw a touchdown, never shot, never scored a basket, unless you're Jerry West. To answer Ruth's question, as building it, yes, he was good. But the problem is when these GMs are like, why are they not mentioning my name? Jake, when the Lakers were on their run, Jake, when the Lakers were on their run, did you ever hear Jerry West say a peep? When the Warriors were built, no.
Like that. Jerry Krause is, though.
Jake,
Okay.
I don't care. That's
all
my
right,
point.
gentlemen.
You're proving my point for me, Jake. If you're a GM, Eric, last thing on it. If you're a GM, if you hire me to be your GM and say it's of the Eagles and I want to keep my job, I'm gonna build it up. If we keep winning and winning and winning, I don't need no damn credit because I'm gonna go to you quietly, say, hey man, I deserve a raise because I'm gonna keep grinding for you. That's all I care about. Rings and pay me. That's it.
But
these
Mike,
GMs have these egos. They never scored a hoop. Jerry Krause couldn't score a hoop. That's all I'm saying.
not everybody, hold on, Mike, not everybody thinks the way you think. So you have to look at it from a different angle. And I can appreciate what Jake is saying. Ruthie, let me answer your question.
I know you
do. I think that Jerry Krause is a great general manager for what he did for that organization?
Yes.
Yes. However, the caveat in this is they said it in the very first part 1 and part 2. He had short man syndrome ego. He wanted to be a part of the boys league, and clearly they were not going to. They ridiculed him from up and down, public, private, it didn't matter.
Yes.
And maybe that was their way of bringing Jerry up. But at the same time, what we saw, and unfortunately, he's not here to defend himself because he has passed away. Unfortunately, we don't have the full scope. We only have what the documentary provided. So because of the 6 titles, because of him, with the exception of Jordan, putting this team together. Even the 96-98 with bringing Kukoc in. And, I mean, Kukoc went through so much just to be respected with this team. I have to say, yes, he was a great GM. The one guy that we're not talking about, and I'm very surprised that no one has brought him up, has been Dennis Rodman. Can I just say this? Let me just say this really quick. Any man that can go to Vegas twice and also go to a WCW Monday Nitro and then show up and put on the court like he never missed a practice or never did anything, we have got to show a lot of love to what Dennis Rodman and the pure talent that he is. Because I can tell you right now, I was in Vegas 3 times last year. Ain't no way I'm going to practice the next day. I'm sorry. It ain't.
Well, he didn't go the next day. Yeah, thanks for the calls, by the way, when you were in Vegas.
Yeah.
You're only 4 hours away from me, Eric, but thanks for the calls.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
Mike.
But that being said.
Next time, I'll let you know.
Okay. It better be next time. But no, but Dennis Rodman, and that's why I said in the beginning before we started, like, I'm like, get me a Rodman thing, but I don't have it on my phone because I'm slow. But anyway, but Rodman, I mean, look, Jordan's like, this dude's not coming back in 48 hours. Like, we knew it. You knew it. But the best part about it, like you said, gets back to practice and feels like, well, got to test his endurance where he's at right now. And he does the Indian run, which running track. We did that a million times. And when Jordan said, I told everybody, you better go slow so Dennis can hang. And Dennis got his turn and just nobody could catch him. And that was Dennis. Like the rebounding, I mean, just the articulation to rebound. Because I used to argue, even when he was in Detroit, before they started their title runs, I was like, that's the best rebounder in the game. And everybody's like, oh, Karl Malone. Look, I wouldn't say he's better. I mean, going head-to-head with Hakeem, probably not. But, like, Dennis Rodman became the best rebounder in the game. And, yeah, I mean, the parties, the Vegas, I mean, you know, showing up with –
Carmen Electra.
Carmen Electra story about hiding behind the couch because, like, Jordan and Pippen are at the door. That was hilarious.
That was pretty
Jordan's
great.
like, I don't even want to say what was in the room, but, yeah, we had to go get Dennis. And he came back to practice, and that was that. But the thing he said more than once is Dennis is like, Phil just knew I needed my thing. Like, I needed my time, but I was always ready to go. And then when he had when Pippen didn't come in, you know, when he got the surgery late and he's like, Michael needed me. And he goes, it was there. He goes, but we were good. He goes, we didn't all have to sit together. We have to do this or that. I mean, Rodman did his thing at night. I mean, like I said, I'll never forget when he kicked the cameraman and or who was right by him, and the cameraman didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Of course, wanted to sue him and stuff. But Rodman to that team, I mean, that's what they needed, 72-10. And, I mean, Reggie Miller, it is funny because your boy did say that they were 2 of those 10 losses was to Indiana. So, I mean, but still, 72-10, I mean, to win the title and just win 3 in a row. But what Rodman meant to that, and you know what? I do take away the Jordan saying, because you still see in his eyes, like, yeah, they were worn down. But, Jake, you talk about the next season. I mean, it was perfect. It was a strike-shortened year, 50 games. They could have went in as a 4, 5, 6, 7 seed. It wouldn't have freaking mattered. Like, right. Jordan's like, you don't think – he goes, I would have signed for 1 year. We could – they had to release Dennis. Dennis would have came back for 1. Basically saying if we would have had to talk to Scotty – because he could have got $14 million. I'm sure Jordan would have made sure he was the highest paid one of the group. And Kerr would have came back. You have Kukoc under contract. You bring Phil back for 1 year. And that's, again, where I look at somebody like a Jerry West. Jerry Krause was a phenomenal GM. And, yes, Jake, Eric's trying to say I don't respect your points. I do. But I'm just saying, as a GM, that's your job to do. Like, it's like that scene in Coach Carter with Samuel L. Jackson when he's mocking him in practice. Like, I drew that play. I tied my shoes. Like, who cares? Like, it's a team thing. You built the team, yes, but you didn't give Jordan his talent. You got to underpay Pippen for the longest time, which he chose to sign the contract. Right. But is he a great GM for what he did? Absolutely. And he got it. And bringing Kukoc in and bringing Luke Longley in. I mean, again, another
point that I want to bring up is what's been on ESPN all day about how Horace Grant feels about the discussion of Jordan and what was in the hotel rooms involving other team players. I mean, he straight up called Jordan a snitch. What is our take on that?
Wait. I don't remember him ever speaking specifically as to what was in the room.
Well,
Oh no, Jordan
he
did in
kind
episode one.
of went into
In
like
episode
a
one.
description
No.
where he was like, the lions were
Ruthie's
over
right.
here, the pot smokers were over here, the women were over there. That's what
And
he
the
said.
alcohol was all over.
Yeah.
And he said the alcohol was all over.
And he
in
said, and he
episode
made
one.
a comment that if the cops were to come in and bust that room at that very moment, that everybody was going to go to jail.
No. The one that Michael was talking about was the time when he was a rookie and he was in Peoria, Illinois. At that
I know, but
he talked about the hotel room. But after that, he never mentioned about the pot smokers and all that. All he did was he walked into the room and he saw the players at that time when he was a rookie that they were, doing cocaine. They had girls over, all that kind of stuff. But he never talked about what was happening in the hotel. The only time he ever talked about the hotel was when he had his own place.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess that's what Grant's argument was the fact that Jordan even mentioned what was in the hotel rooms.
Okay. Was Horace on the team at the time?
Craig Hodges called him out on that too. Craig Hodges called Michael Jordan out too, going to Horace Grant's defense a few weeks back when the Jordan rules came out and they said that they thought Horace Grant related to Sam Smith. But Jake, that's Ruthie's saying. That's Horace Grant's point. That was Craig Hodges' point. Like, you had video in practice, and the camera crews were allowed in the locker room when we saw behind, but they weren't allowed in the locker room too early. And afterwards, like drinking a beer, this or that, whatever. But for Jordan, look, that's one thing. Again, everybody's been in the locker room, guys, girls. There are things that just stay in there. Again, the NBA was definitely not saying these guys weren't partying and reckless. And he said, "Oh, we got arrested." So Jake, he's still busting his teammates. He's ripping Horace Grant for doing the same thing. And if Horace Grant just said he's difficult to play with, again, I'm not saying that those Bulls teams are any good. I'm just saying you can't call somebody sold you out and say they quote unquote snitched and then mention that in episode one. Yeah, you're a rookie and he is wide-eyed. I get that part of it. But come on, man, 35 years later, you don't need to be talking about that. I mean,
okay, wait a minute.
Spotlight on the situation.
Okay, but this was a blip in this entire documentary, y'all. Hold on. I think we're escalating this to a whole different level here. Mm-hmm. So, Ruthie, to your point, okay, he may have called people out, and I don't think he called them out by name. He just said, "This is what I saw in the room. Here's the reason why I saw it in the room." I'm not calling Jordan a snitch on that one. Because here's my thing. If you gonna call people out on something, to me, you gonna call them by name. Right. So if we're all together, the four of us are together, and the three of y'all are partying, and I walk in the room and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever's going on, and I decide to leave, and then 10 years down the road, they asked me about that particular incident. I say, "Oh yeah, Mike was over here doing this. Jake was around the corner doing that. Ruthie came out looking like this." Then to me, then I'm snitching on somebody. No, but if I just basically say what I saw in the room,
but he did
calling anybody out to it.
Right,
but did point out that the whole team was in that wrong room.
If you're gonna call out somebody, you gotta call out that Horace because of the way he left Chicago and went to Orlando.
Mike, hold on. I can't hear Jake. Go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
The thing is with Horace Grant, he's got to understand that if you're going to bring up this kind of stuff here, how about we talk about how you pushed your way out of Chicago and played for the Orlando Magic after Michael retired, okay? The way he did it was such a childish way, and he even proved it during The Last Dance. He picked up his bags and went to Orlando instead of sticking around in Chicago, and that's how he did it. That was what
they were trying to get him on the cheap.
It doesn't matter. You're still going to be part of a great team. Yeah, Michael's gone. I get it, but you still have Pippen.
So, Mike, you mean to tell me Pippen and Grant couldn't have got it done in 94 and 95 against Houston? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
They could have had a shot at least. I mean,
no, they wouldn't have got it done against Houston without Jordan because I'm sorry, they had nobody that can match up against.
Would they have gone back to the finals?
Yeah, I think they would. They probably would have split with Houston.
Okay,
maybe.
So they would have went back to the finals.
But Grant saw how they treated Pippen, Jay and Eric. I see what you're saying. I'm not saying they couldn't have, but they wanted to lowball him, and Horace Grant had listened to Scottie Pippen the whole time. And again, I'm not saying that the way he did it. But if they're going to lowball him, hey, Orlando paid him, Jake. Don't tell me you're not going to be a 6'10" dominant
The
dude.
only reason he went to Orlando was because he got paid and he
Exactly.
had a chance to play Chicago.
That's the whole point.
What he wanted, and he got it.
Get paid.
But he hasn't won a ring since, Mike, and he's retired from the game. You was
Exactly.
on a roll with Jordan
Exactly.
and Pippen, and then Jordan left, which means
Right.
it was left up to you and Scotty to keep the ball rolling.
And
Now,
Tony
if this
Kukoc.
team would have continually – now, think about it like this for one moment, and definitely I want to get Ruthie your opinion on this. Let's say that Pippen and Grant would have stayed together that 94 season, okay? They could have got back to the NBA Finals.
Maybe.
Jerry, we just all sat here and agreed that
Right.
Jerry Krause was a great general manager.
Could have.
You're right. We don't know. But if the majority of the pieces are still together, Mike, you mean to tell me that you're going to sit there and honestly tell me with a straight face, with more gray hair than I got, you're going to sit there and try and tell me right now that Pippen and Grant without Jordan would not have got back to the NBA Finals when Jordan retired?
As much as it pains me to say, in 94, they wouldn't have beat your Knicks. There's no way. Not without Jordan. Jordan was the X factor against the Knicks. And I've had Gray since I was 17, cheap shot artist.
Hey,
but that being said,
buddy, I got it just like you.
I know. But you can look up. But here's the thing. Let me just finish about the sellout thing and Horace Grant. I'm not saying I'm Grant's right, wrong, or indifferent. But Eric, in this day and age, Michael Jordan didn't have to say he was on the team, because I could go back and say 1984-85 Bulls. I can YouTube it. I can see every single player on the team and be like, oh, that guy was a drunk. That guy was. And then in the later episodes, he's like, oh, yeah, guys were smoking cigarettes in the locker room. Now he ripped. He goes, you know who they got the cigarettes from? The coaches. Like at halftime, they're drinking beer. So again, he says it twice, and I understand like the context of it. I'm not calling him a snitch for that. I'm just saying the first one, I'm kind of with Ruthie on, because I think you're a little bit of a snitch when you say, oh, the Coke's here, the weed's here. All I have to do is YouTube who was on that team, Eric. Back then you couldn't YouTube them. That's fine. But you can do it now. And, again, I'm not saying that doing drugs and partying like that is right. I'm just saying if you're going to call somebody a snitch for leaking quote-unquotes to Sam Smith, I mean, you did kind of snitch too. I'm not saying –
Listen, we will agree to disagree. I'm not calling him a snitch.
All right.
I'm not doing it.
Me neither.
All right.
Nope.
All right, final thoughts, and we got to get out of here. Ladies first, Ruthie. Final thoughts on The Last Dance and everything.
I hope there's an encore. Bring me all the highlights.
Yeah. Mike, final thoughts?
Final thoughts is it did a job, because now LeBron wants to play with MJ. That's a slam I said I had.
Oh, we didn't get to talk about that.
He could have played with MJ. Dude, look, Jake, I think I said it to you. LeBron's a metal midget. He would never be on Kobe and Michael's level. Nobody was on Michael's level.
Except for Kobe.
Not many were at Kobe's level. Kobe's a teeny bit below Michael. But LeBron saying, oh, he could have played. The whole thing real quick, Eric, about LeBron and the whole Cowboys thing, which makes you want to vomit too. Dude, just because you're 6'8", yeah, they can't pass interfere you. Gronk was big, and they started jacking him in the legs. LeBron, with the metal midget he is, couldn't have taken that abuse. That's all I'm going to say.
Not at all.
But it got LeBron talking. LeBron wants to remake Space Jam, which I'm sorry, unless Jordan agrees to a cameo, I will not waste my money on it. I will never watch it 500 times.
Horrible.
Absolutely not. Not even close. But, dude, for people, and you can say the same thing about Jordan too, because like, oh, he said he agreed to it when LeBron won his third. I get the whole thing. Dude, it's video, it's footage that, again, like Phil Jackson said, like when he retired the first time and said, you know, you're taking a talent away from the people, but I understand you've been through a lot. Like for younger generations, again, and I get we always are prisoners to the moment, what we just saw, but dude, I mean, seeing MJ play live, watching as many games as I obviously could on TV as well, seeing him when he came to Phoenix, even driving out to LA a few times, when Clippers games, not Lakers games, obviously. But I mean, it served its purpose. Again, that competitive drive and the way he left it, because in his eyes, like, I'm not in a strike shortened season. I kind of got to agree with Michael Wilbon on this one, Eric. because they in a strike shortened season, even if you play the Spurs and a young Pop and a young Tim Duncan, David Robinson, I think the Bulls win 7, man. I do. In a strike shortened season, now it's 82 games, because there was no load management back then, as we know too. But dude, it was awesome. It was moving. I wish it would have had more of his kids in it though. You know, especially like 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah, that would have been cool to have like some interviews.
I think that was done purposely. I think that was done purposely, and here's my reason why. We all know Michael Jordan to be a very private man off camera, and I think if he was the one kind of directing this whole thing and kind of guiding what was going to be talked about, what wasn't going to be talked about, I think he was only allowing them to be in it for that long. So, you know, keeping that whole, because we heard nothing from his wife. We heard all from his mother.
His first wife.
Right. Excuse me. His first wife.
Mother of the children. Right.
Right. So.
No, I know.
Right.
Right. And that's why I look at it like, especially like maybe not, you know, everything, but especially the latter episodes, like, yeah, you know, it's so great. I mean, his sons are saying, yeah, we definitely did not like Utah. And I mean, granted, his mom was a part of it. And yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of see what you're saying, like on purpose, but I mean, just to like his daughter, like, I mean, when she was talking, I was like, man, it would have been cool if Jason Eric could have talked to him and like, hey, you know, I get it's from the first marriage and I'm sure there's reasons, but it would have been cool, like, especially for 10, if there was a little bit of interview with them all together.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, again, everybody's
no, I get it. I get it.
But
Jake,
I do see what you're saying. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, I mean, it's
to wrap it up. One last point for me, and then I'll be done. To wrap it up for me, thank you ESPN and Jason Ayer for producing such a great documentary about Michael Jordan and his dynasty and the Chicago Bulls. And I want all of the LeBron and Michael Jordan comparisons to be laid to rest.
Amen.
Mike.
Go away.
Amen. Jake, you got the final thought, then we're out of here.
I also want to say also that Netflix also did an amazing job teaming up with them. NBA Entertainment going.
Will it be on Netflix?
For the 97-98 season. NBA Entertainment was the only reason that this documentary was able to go the way that Jason Ayer wanted it to, because if it wasn't for them having that crew in that 97-98, we would not have The Last Dance. But this was such a monumental success. I loved every single minute. And another thing is, too, what I really did like is that I liked that he kept his personal life separate. The only reason he brought up was because he got to witness his final basketball game in it before his first retirement, and that was the purpose to why he left. Because, I mean, the murder of James Jordan still lives within Michael, and it's still a part of him, but it also was able to go into his professional life and move into baseball. So I love the respectable ways that they were able to go down this road, take us back to when it all started, and also make it about a Chicago Bulls documentary. We had Kerr, Pippen, Rodman. We even had, Bill Wennington talked, for crying out loud. Cartwright talked. Kukoc talked. I mean,
Kobe talked.
That was so nice when I saw it.
I know.
But
I said it
did an amazing job. They were just one of the best, and I'm definitely going to have to rewatch this a couple of times until sports comes back.
Oh, listen, it's still sitting on my DVR, all 10 episodes, even including the Stephen A. Smith special that he did tonight.
Eric, to answer Ruthie's question about Netflix, because they were a part producer in it, I know the first 4 episodes it said Netflix. If you didn't live in the U.S., you could watch it on Netflix. You couldn't binge it like you normally would, because I think they released it just like they did on ESPN week. Well, you couldn't because it wasn't done editing anyway, like Jake told us early on. They weren't done editing it. But I'm hoping, because I know it's on ESPN Plus right now, but I'm hoping within the year that it is on Netflix and it will be up to do that. Because they were with Mandalay Sports too, like you're saying, but they were a part producer in it too. Facebook, I know they all had it. So, I mean, it's going to be on ESPN Plus for, forever. But
stay there.
I'm hoping it goes to Netflix too.
Yeah. Hey, really quick, before I let everybody here ride out, I want to say congratulations to Miss Ruth the Truth. I understand you got a new show. Talk about it real quick.
Yeah, I've actually had a couple opportunities from different sports platforms that want me to do a weekly episode of just me. from like 30 to 45 minutes, I'll be sending in some audio from just like a Ruth the Truth podcast that I've been dreaming about for the past 2 years. So I'm starting to put the wheels in motion on that. Very excited.
Yes. And I saw on Twitter you're doing one Monday.
Yes, it'll be Monday nights from 8 p.m. to 9:15. I will shoot you guys the link when I get more information. But
Perfect. So make sure you check our girl out, Sports Talk Florida, Miss Ruth the Truth. NBC Sports Radio 1060, the Sports Hangover out there in Arizona, Mr. Michael Carotenuto, and of course, Turning Point Podcast and telling both sides of the story, my man, Mr. Jake Rongholt, your man, Eric Wilson, Sports Arena.